Thanks, Patsy. We are so excited to be here today. I am Stephanie Sommers, and this year I was very honored to be asked to take over as the ACES coordinator for the ACES project, and I work for Minneapolis Public Schools Adult Education Program. And with me I have my colleague Heather Turngren.
Hello everyone, welcome to this ACES webinar for managers. I am Heather Turngren. I work with Stephanie in Minneapolis Adult Education. My biggest job is being a teacher, but I also help coordinate our Career Pathways curriculum, and I work a little bit of time as a regional transitions coordinator for Minneapolis.
Okay, so we have divided today's webinar into a few different sections. The first you'll see here is getting started, and in this section we would like to get to know a little bit about our participants and how knowledgeable they are about the ACES initiative and how involved they have been up to this point. So in just a moment we're going to launch a poll where you'll just be asked one question to let us know a little bit about how involved you've been with ACES, and I think we can let that poll go now. So I should be visible on your screens right now.
Yep, it's there, so go ahead.
I see that 6% of you have voted. We're up to, now it's rapid, it's fast and furious, 43%, 51%, 60%, 70, 80, 83% of us have voted. And we'll keep this open for another couple of seconds. And right now we're at 91%. Those of us who haven't voted might be the organizers and support team here. So I'm going to close the poll. I can see that 72% of us said, I have a copy of the TIF somewhere in my office. All right, since we did say all that apply, we won't take that as a bad sign. 59% says, I have attended an ACES training within the past 6 months. That is great. 78% of us have encouraged my staff to participate in ACES. That's wonderful. 59% no teachers from their program have done one ACES PLC. That's a good number. And 47% of us are actively working on ACES in my program year. So you might say one of our goals for today would be to increase that 47%. Maybe we can get it up in the 70 or 80% range. We're hoping to give you some practical, easy ways that you could get your staff actively working on ACES this year. And we're hoping by the end of this webinar you will all feel like you are in that actively working range. Thank you so much for taking our poll. I'm going to get rid of that.
I like to see that at least people have a TIF somewhere in their office.
Okay. So our objectives for today. Participants in today's webinar will gain a baseline understanding of the ACES initiative and how it relates to CCRS. One thing that we have been trying to work on this year is to let everyone know that ACES and CCRS are not competing standards. The idea is not that you choose one or the other to use in your program. We are hoping that after today, programs will understand that these are complementary standards that help a program to grow strong and move their students in the right direction for transitioning on to the next steps. ACES is a Minnesota-grown initiative project. CCRS, of course, is national, and we'll be talking more about that in just a minute or two. So besides understanding those differences, We'll learn about upcoming ACES professional development, learn about new and existing ACES resources, provide feedback on a new ACES implementation observation tool that has just been created, and see a model for ACES TIF implementation from Eric Lind, who was very gracious and offered to help us, well, accepted my offer of being included in today's webinar. So thank you so much. These are the objectives. All right. And moving on, we wanted to recap briefly what the ACES project has looked like up to this point. So it has had a couple of different phases. It started in 2011. Heather and I were both involved at that point. The goal of phase 1 was to identify critical transition skills. We did this by forming a team of professionals from around the state who looked at different frameworks such as Equip for the Future, 21st Century Skills, and identified what critical transition skills we would put into our own TIF. And we eventually came up with 8 categories. And after phase 1, the product was the Transitions Integration Framework, which is a document that contains all 8 categories, their definitions, skills and sub-skills, along with some activities and ideas for how to use those in the classroom.
Can I just point out that that Transitions Integration Framework is also what we refer to as the TIF.
Okay. The second phase started in 2013. It continues till today. In this phase, we worked on providing professional development to instructors to integrate transition skills. We started out with a small cohort group who tried out the TIF in their classrooms. They took an online course that was created by Betsy Parrish. They had a team of coaches. Heather and I were coaches. Suzanne McCurdy from St. Paul was a coach. And we gathered feedback from them after their initial experience using the TIF, and we made changes. Then we started doing PLCs last year, professional learning communities, to help teachers get more knowledgeable about specific categories of the TIF. We had 2 different PLC cycles, and in each cycle, instructors drove very in-depth into 3 separate categories of the TIF. So those who took both PLCs would have learned about 6 of the categories. We have also been doing category webinars around the state at the different regional events. Oh, I'm sorry, the webinars were piloted last year. We developed 6 different webinars. They are housed on the Atlas resource webpage. We have webinars for all of our categories except for numeracy and the academic language categories, because those are so closely related to CCRS. The webinars all include a video of a teacher in a classroom setting using the TIF and integrating a lesson from the TIF into the classroom, and they were very well received. And then the workshops are what I was referring to a moment ago, where we've been at different regional events, and we have more information about regionals right now.
I'd just like to point out for a moment, we started with face-to-face PLCs, and then feedback from the PLC participants and from managers made us move to a more hybrid event to incorporate face-to-face and then online components of those PLCs. So it was really great feedback we heard from you out in the community.
That was wonderful. That allowed, for example, myself living in the metro area, I was able to facilitate a hybrid PLC with some of my colleagues up in Duluth. And it was really valuable for me to make those connections with people around the state. All right, moving on. We have 2 regional events coming up. The first one is this Thursday and Friday in Bemidji, the North ABE Regional. my colleague Heather will be presenting at that regional on effective communication.
No, I'll be doing the Mankato. It's
Oh,
Kelly is doing the.
I'm so
no
sorry.
problem.
Excuse me. Kelly will be facilitating in Bemidji on developing a future pathway, and Heather will be joining those folks in Mankato doing effective communication. So if you have not had an opportunity to get some of your staff registered to attend these events, we would love to have a good turnout so that people can learn more about these categories. One thing that's I'll take a moment to note is the developing a future pathway category has been incorporated into the adult diploma, and so that's one that we have taken it around before, and we're bringing it back out so that people know that it's a big part of that curriculum. Okay, it is time now for a little quiz. We would like to know what you already know about ACES. So we've developed a few questions here to get a feeling for how ACES, what an ACE you are when it comes to ACES. So I believe this quiz has maybe 6 questions. I'm going to launch it now, and we'll give you a couple minutes to work on it. Thank you so much. At this point, we have just hit 50% of people submitting their quiz answers. We will keep this up for another minute or so. I know some of those questions are very tricky, so I'm not surprised it's taking some of you a minute. We're up to 65%, 68%.
We're not under the 40-hour rule for this sort of quiz or test.
75%. We'll keep it up for another few seconds. See if we can't get up over to 80% here. 83%. Wonderful. 85. Okay. 88. My goodness. Okay. I think 90%. I'm not sure we can hope for better than that. So I'm going to close the quiz and we will look at the results. Okay, we're going to review here. And here we go. I want to say you should all be patting yourselves on the back. Our average score was 81%. 100% of you knew what ACES stood for, academic, career, and employability skills. Wonderful. 95% of you were able to say what the TIF is. Very good. Not bad, since we went over that a few minutes ago. Great recall. 79% were able to identify that the TIF has 8 categories. Okay. Hopefully some of you were able to name one of the TIF categories. They are numeracy, critical thinking, self-management,
Navigating systems.
developing of future pathways, language and learning strategies, academic language, and I think we might have hit them all there. All right. 50% of us. Where do you go to learn more about ACES and the TIF? So you can go to the Atlas website, and we'll be looking at that in just a minute. You can contact me, the local library, not so much. And then what is one ACES-related professional development opportunities that members of your staff have participated in? Hopefully some of you said things like going to see ACES-related session at a regional event, participating in a webinar, being a part of a PLC, one of those types of things.
We'd like to point out that some of this information might be helpful for when it comes your time to write or resubmit for the 5-year narrative. You may be having to document some of the PD that you and your program or your consortium has done around ACES.
All right, a word from our transitions coordinator. I'm going to close these results and we will move on. All right, the next portion has to do with the idea of the content standards and how ACES or the TIF, how that works with other standards that we have here in Minnesota. And for this, the next couple of slides, I'll be handing things over to Patsy.
Great, thank you. So can you go ahead and click on the PowerPoint one more time, then it'll pop up for us.
Here? Or do you want me to go back, Patsy? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you just need to hit the PowerPoint itself. It didn't come back up yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Okay. So while she's doing that, I just wanted to say a few words about how this kind of all fits together. This is a message that was given at Summer Institute from our director, Todd, and also at other manager meetings, etc. So you may have heard this in some iteration before, but we just want to be sure people are, understanding the scope of this. And I'm still not seeing the PowerPoint, guys, just if you want to keep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Sorry.
We'll get it. I'll keep talking. Yeah. So basically, we want to be sure people understand what we mean when we say content standards. And by content standards, we mean these are the standards the state has adopted that describe what students should know and be able to do upon successful completion of an instructional course. So these are the things that define what it is that we teach in adult basic education. Here it is. Thank you, everyone. And so we have in Minnesota adopted an approach to content standards that's three-pronged. So I'll actually let you go to the next slide. This is a visual that's kind of in evolving mode, but basically does capture what it is we want to get across here. And that is that, of course, in adult basic education, we teach basic skills, reading and writing and math. And then we, of course, teach digital literacy skills. And then there's those professional/soft skills, those transition skills that are rather difficult to define sometimes, but are really the make or break skills that our students need to do well in whatever's next, be it post-secondary options or career training course or more stable employment or simply be deeper communication, community involvement, whatever it is that they're working toward. These are the series of skills that students need. And so in adult basic ed, of course, we spend a lot of our time in the basic skills, and those are defined two ways: in the college and career readiness standards for adult education, the CCRS, and then also there's some overlap with the TIF, particularly in effective communication and learning strategies. And then the North Star digital literacy standards are what we use to define those digital literacy skills. And then finally, and why we're here today, is to think about those transition skills, the professional or soft skills. And those for Minnesota are defined in the TIF, in the Transitions Integration Framework. So these three documents, CCRS, the TIF, and North Star, work together to define what it is that we teach, what it is our students learn in ABE, and what it is that we think they need to know and be able to do to be successful in whatever it is that they're moving on to do next. And then just to kind of finish describing the visual, you'll see that it's all kind of on top of this blue background, and that's the content. So everything rests, all of these skills are resting on some sort of meaningful content for our learners. And for those of us working with English language learners, for perhaps our new arrivals to the United States, that might be life skills, just how to get along in your community. In other programs, it's occupational. In something else, it might be more along the lines of a GED preparation, science and social studies, etc. Maybe it's a civics or citizenship oriented or something else entirely. So lots of different content through which we teach these basic skills, digital literacy skills, and professional skills. So we wanted to just frame the conversation by being sure that it's clear where the TIF rests in these this three-pronged approach to ABE as we've defined it. There's a lot more information on the content standards webpage, and that's linked here at the bottom of your screen. It's at the Atlas homepage, and if you go to the Professional tab and click on Content Standards. And just so you know, we're in the process of creating a resource library around content standards too, so that people who've been not able to get to certain workshops or want to get a handout or want to find one-pagers that our various teams have put together, that we would be able to have one place where you can go and find that. That content standards page will link you to everything, CCRS, TIF, and digital literacy. And of course, the ACES website has a great deal more specifically on the TIF, but if you're interested in just the content standards, this would be the place to maybe begin. And that's about that. I'm happy to take any questions, or we'll just move right along. I don't see any hands up.
Okay. Thanks very much, Patsy. And maybe this is a good time to mention this PowerPoint has been saved in your resource section of this webinar, and so that should be on your control panel under, I'm sorry, not resource, it's called materials. If you were to go in there, you could download or view again this PowerPoint so that you would have that link to the content standards page that Patsy was just talking about.
Right, and I am seeing one hand up, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute Jill Rivard. Jill, are you there?
No, I did not raise my hand.
Oh, well, it's a mystery. All right, never mind. Go ahead, Stephanie and Heather.
Okay, thanks so much. So we are moving into the next section of our presentation today, which is ACES resources. So as Patsy kind of mentioned that they're working on a content standard resource library, you might have read in the Minnesota Connect newsletter or heard somewhere that we are trying to build up some different resource libraries that are housed on the Atlas website. The one curated by Marn Frank about evidence-based reading has been up for a while. There's one about writing this year. There's, I believe, a GED support section. And the one that we're going to be talking about right now is the ACES resource library. In the ACES resource library, you can find archived TIF Lens webinars. You can watch short 15 to 20-minute classroom videos of a teacher integrating transition skills from the TIF. You can download sample ACES lesson plans. Again, those were created for the TIF Lens webinars, and they are available at the beginning, intermediate, and advanced level. They can be downloaded and used by teachers as they are, or they can be adapted and tweaked to suit a teacher's particular classroom and students. And there are other resources to support transitions-minded instruction. And I'm going to show you now where you find this resource library. From the Atlas webpage, you would click on Professional Development at the top of the screen. And then you would be taken to, you would see a drop-down menu, and what you would click on is ACES Resources. And then under ACES Resources, you'll see the 8 TIF categories, as well as the TIF Lens webinars, workshop materials that have been collected. So there are quite a lot of nice resources here for programs to use. We are adding new resources every month. That is part of my role this year. You might have noticed again in the newsletter that we each month or so will be talking about a new resource. So I recently shared the Integrating Career Awareness Curriculum Guide. So there is you can download the guide from here. You can read a review of the guide on the Links website. There is another resource under the Navigating Systems section that was just added. It is about something called Skills to Pay the Bills, a curriculum that talks about soft skills with lots of great interactive lessons and short videos that teachers can use in class. And just above where you see that gray arrow, these are the sample lessons. So if a teacher, maybe a new teacher or someone who isn't so comfortable with a particular TIF category, if they're wondering how they might try implementing a lesson in their classroom, this is would be a kind of by trying a beginning, intermediate, or advanced lesson that's already been created with all the activities, with the assessments, everything that you need.
This is Heather, and I just would like to point out that these materials are both for ELL or ESL learners as well as your ABE learner. So it's not just focused on one or the other. And as Stephanie was saying, each of these materials has been used in a classroom. They have been vetted. They're ready to take and use and modify as needed. It's a great resource for your staff.
Mm-hmm. One thing that we've been trying to think about are ways that programs could use ACES during their regularly scheduled PD. So I know a lot of programs, you have maybe a monthly staff meeting. What about the idea of breaking into groups and having teachers who teach at these different levels look at a lesson and generate ideas of how they might be able to use it in their own classrooms, or spending an ACES 10 minutes looking at the ICA curriculum guide, talking about, there's a lot of lessons in here, but maybe picking one lesson that your teachers will look at and talk about how they could use it at different levels in their classes. So we're trying to think of quick ways that programs and managers can use these resources to keep current with ACES, but not take up a lot of their time, because we know there's a lot of other demands as far as meetings go and professional development from the district or from other entities. I'm not sure that everyone knows that there is a YouTube channel devoted solely to our professional development. You can see, if you were on the ACES website, the Atlas website, you would see check out more Minnesota ABE videos. If you were to click there, it would take you to the YouTube channel. I've also put the URL here. All of the webinars that Atlas has sponsored, all of those classroom videos that have been developed, the Hot Ideas session from last summer's Summer Institute, all of these things are available on the YouTube channel. Another way you might be able to spend a few minutes having an ACES 10 minutes in a staff meeting might be to pull up one of these videos, watch it as a group, and then do some think, pair, share activities with your staff. It would not take very much time, but it would be a wonderful way to get ACES into your regularly scheduled meeting or PD. Patsy says that all the supplemental service providers have videos on this YouTube channel, so there are really just so many wonderful resources available here. And then we wanted to point out, as I've mentioned a couple of times, the Minnesota ABE Connect newsletter. I have to say, Marisa has been doing such an amazing job this year as it's moved to being published more frequently on a weekly basis, of making sure that all of us who submit articles, remember to get them in. She provides these great graphics. She's such a whiz at the formatting. This was the latest one that I submitted about skills to pay the bills. At the same time that this article was published, then the resource was added to that resource page, and the idea is to draw people's attention to the resources that are being added and to give them ideas about how they can use ACES in the classroom. Navigating systems is one category, along with developing a future pathways that teachers are keen on learning more about due to the fact that it's part of that adult diploma curriculum. I have had teachers emailing me saying that their programs are starting navigating systems classes and they're looking for more resources. So here's a resource, a great resource with lessons, videos. Wouldn't take a lot of prep time to use this in a classroom. I've already kind of spoken about a lot of this, but just to really reiterate the fact that we are trying to make it easy on managers to keep ACES a part of their staff's common conversations. We know that you have so many different things competing for your time, but some quick ideas using these ACES articles that are going to be featured on a regular basis, maybe reading one and looking at the resource in a meeting, or using them in a PLC or a study circle with your staff would be other ways of keeping ACES fresh in everybody's mind. And then we just have a couple other things that we're going to be showing you, and Heather has a comment too.
I'd like to find out if you are a manager and you're already doing something that you would like to share out with other managers. Please chat some other ideas that you might have on how you can be using your ACES moment in a staff meeting.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Yes, we would love to see some chatting here. We definitely think that we are so proud to have 44 people joining us today, and learning from each other would be a great use of this time as well, the time that we have together. All right, so we have more than 50 leaders from around the state, people who have been trained as ACES facilitators for a PLC, those who have led a workshop, those who have been leaders with ACES in their program. And some feedback that we got from them is that they wanted to stay connected to each other, even though maybe they're not doing a PLC at this time. And so that has led us to try and schedule quarterly ACES Leaders webinars, which will be a time for us to get together and connect about how ACES is making an impact on our field, best practices, questions that are coming up in programs, and things like that. The first webinar is going to be Tuesday, December 1st from 2 to 3:30. We'll be giving updates about ACES activities and resources, sharing success stories on transitions integration, and connecting with other ACES leaders statewide. So if you know of anyone in your program who is a leader, please encourage them to register for this webinar, and we'll be sending out more information about that soon. I'm sure it will appear in the newsletter when it gets closer to the date. All right, just a couple more things about ACES resources. We have a new catalog that we've been working on that helps to put managers in touch with people who can. Okay, we have been working on a catalog. It is a Google Doc, and it is a way for managers and programs to get directly in touch with trainers who know how to do ACES trainings, and eventually it will also be a list of trainings that have been developed related to ACES. This year there was a change. Atlas is not funding things like PLCs. So the funding for those are coming through the regions from the regional transitions coordinators. And so what a manager would do would be to look at this catalog, find a trainer who is capable of developing or delivering the training that you're interested in, and then contacting her directly. The catalog contains the names, emails, phone numbers of different trainers from around the state. You would find someone who is available and maybe close to you and contact them about setting up a training. So I'm just going to give a minute if anyone has questions about that. I know it is different than last year when Atlas was coordinating more of these types of things directly. So if there are any questions, please let us know. I also wanted to read out a comment that Kirsten posted. She says that we have developed a closed group on Facebook called Northwest ACES, where we choose a category of the month from the TIF to focus on as a staff. On the Facebook page, staff can upload ideas, strategies, videos of lessons they have tried out, etc. That sounds absolutely amazing. I would love for us all to be shared with that.
Don't keep it so private. You can maybe allow some of us to come in. I think it's also a wonderful way of using technology within your staff development.
Yes, and Kathleen, is the link to the catalog, is that available on the Atlas website? We will make that available on the Atlas website. I'm not sure that it's there right now. I do believe that if you went to the materials section and you access the PowerPoint that way, you could at least copy and paste the link into an address bar and use it like that. I think that would work.
This is Patsy. I'm just going to put it in the box here too so people can find it. It's going to take me a second, but I'll put it in the chat box for folks too.
Keep in mind it is a Google Doc. We have created it that way so that the different facilitators and leaders can go in and update their information as needed. And so rather than having it be a static document that somebody would get out of date rather quickly, we've made it a live document, and so we hope that works for people. I see that George Kimball wrote a comment from the DOC, so Teresa Luther Dolan will do an abbreviated ACES PLC at the Department of Corrections November Education Directors Meeting toward the goal of ensuring our supervisors and managers have the ACES PLC experience. That's great. I know Teresa has been so involved with ACES up to this point. She gave me some early feedback on our observation tool that we'll all be looking at later this afternoon, and I know that they're doing some great work over at the Department of Corrections around ACES. Thank you to everyone who's posted a comment. We'd love to keep that going. It's certainly not too late. All right, so lastly, we're going to talk about this ACES 101 course. This course was developed by Leah Conklin Olson. It will be housed on the MLC's online training library, and I believe Patsy's got a few more things to say about this.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, most of the information is here on the slide for you, but this, just so that you as managers throughout the state know, was in direct response to feedback about needing to be able to get people up to speed who join your programs without having the benefit of a PLC, or perhaps they come in mid-year and aren't able to get to new teacher orientation right away. And so people who really need just-in-time, what is ACES? What's the big picture? Like, what do I need to know to get started on integrating this work? So we heard you and have developed this course. Leah Conklin Olson, then, who's was our ACES project lead for some time, put this together. She's just putting the finishing touches on it now. It'll be launching in about 10 days. So on November 1st, we'll be able to go ahead and have people go through that course. It's hosted at the MLC. So if you've ever directed teachers or yourself have gone through any of the MLC online trainings, you're familiar with that website, but it'll be at the online.themlc.org. It is self-paced, so you don't have to start at a certain time or wait for a certain cohort or something. It's when you're ready, you go in and you do it. It's chunked though in a kind of a interesting way, in that we realize that some people need some pieces but not others, or they might have time for certain pieces but not others. So it's a little bit of a choose your own adventure story. And we did that on purpose because we know people are joining us from so many different places as far as their background around ACES, their background around content standards, and what it is that they have time for, perhaps as part-time teachers. So basically, there's an introduction to the state standards that's rather quick. Just what are the three what is that three-pronged approach? What are those three documents? Where can you learn more? Then there's an introduction to ACES, which is just a very general kind of scratching the surface. What is this initiative? How did it begin? Why is it important? Where does it fit in instruction? And then there are 6 modules, so teachers can pick and choose among, they can do all 6 or they can do some and not others. Focusing on effective communication, learning strategies, self-management, navigating systems, critical thinking, and then developing a future pathway. You'll note that we're not doing the last 2, which are academic language and skills and numeracy, and that's because those 2 areas, academic language and skills and numeracy, are actually more carefully and thoughtfully defined in the college and career readiness standards and more thoroughly done there than they are in the TIF. And so we want people to, if they're going to PD around academic language and going to PD around numeracy, it makes more sense to direct their attention towards the college and career readiness standards, professional development around math and English language arts. So we're focusing this course on the other 6 categories. And then assessment, how to make sure that your students are in fact gaining the skills that you are integrating via the TIF. So that's the last section of the course. It's online, it's self-paced, developed by Leah but facilitated by Stephanie. And so there are some points in the course where teachers are asked to do some activities, submit something, and Stephanie will be the person that's answering questions and responding to those things that are turned in. So the CEUs will depend on how much they do. So if your teacher does all of it, it'll be, it could be upwards of 10, I believe, CEUs, or if it's just a portion, it'll be according to what they've completed. So that's going to launch again in about 10 days. So we're excited about that. We'll, of course, get that in the newsletter and link it to the website as well. So as you have staff who join you or perhaps just started this fall and didn't have a chance to do any ACES last year, this would be a great place to get them up to speed.
Thank you, Patsy.
You're welcome.
Talking about that. So again, pardon me, my role as a facilitator will be answering questions, letting people know that their assessments have been received and that they've met the requirements for the course, and helping them to get their CEUs. And I will be taking the course when it goes live, so that I myself will have my ACES 101 certification, and I'm happy to help anyone with it if there are questions that people have along the way.
This is Heather, and I would just like to point out that if you have staff who are wondering how can they get CEUs because they're up for relicensure, this is one method, and the Minnesota Literacy Council has many other options for online CEU for licensure renewals.
Okay, yeah, that's always a big deal for the teachers among us. All right, so we are going to pause here, and we're going to encourage more of you to use your chat feature. So a few people already jumped out in front and told us some ways that they have been using ACES resources in their program. We're hoping to hear from some more of you who will let us know one way that you might use an ACES resource with your staff in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So we're not holding you to 4 to 6 weeks. We were hoping to make it something you're thinking about for your planning for the next couple of meetings, maybe if you meet with your staff monthly, maybe in November or December. is there a resource that we've just talked about in this section of the presentation that you might be able to incorporate into an ACES moment in a meeting or a training that you have scheduled? Okay. Sarah, I'll use some of these resources in training new staff. Thank you. Kathleen, Metro North ABE is going through year 2 of the ACES PLC with all teachers this year. That's right, I believe Melody is going to be helping you out, right? But we always have the issue of catching up staff who miss trainings or come on staff mid-year, etc. So you're happy to learn about the online course. Wonderful, wonderful. So we have Kirsten, we have an ACES trainer on our staff. She wrote, and we usually set aside 30 to 45 minutes at a staff meeting. Great. Okay. Someone said they're going to share all the resources. Wonderful, wonderful.
Ooh.
Using the ACES resources for aligning courses. Yes, Minneapolis has been doing that too. We use some of our transitions funds this year for curriculum development, and part of that project involves using ACES, aligning the new curriculum to ACES and the TIF.
I was going to talk about what Jody is talking about, using a video in an upcoming staff meeting. There are so many possibilities that you can be sharing ACES and the TIF. What Eric is mentioning, share new TIF resources with teaching staff. Some teachers may have gone through the ACES PLC, but they might be forgetting that new resources are constantly added to that ACES resource library.
Okay, wonderful. It's important to remember that the ACES and the TIF can also be a tool for volunteers to use, as Sylvia pointed out. I believe that Allie Riley from Neighborhood House has put together a training about how to use the TIF with volunteers, and that might be something that people would want to look into. I will recommend the caption videos on the ACES resource library set. Yes, Marissa was responsible for getting all of our videos closed captioned, so that is a wonderful addition to our library. You're looking forward, Jim says, to letting all staff know about the YouTube site. Yes, wonderful. YouTube is blocked in certain programs, I know. It's blocked in ours, for example, so we have to use an override feature when we go to it, but well worth that extra effort. Okay. We want to thank you for your comments. Feel free to keep chatting out and sharing these great ideas. Okay. Oh, wonderful. So Patsy's just shared the link to the ACES workshop archive. This would be one that this would be where you could find the materials from Allie's using the TIF with volunteers presentation that I referred to a few minutes ago. Thanks for sharing that, Patsy.
I'd like to remind staff again in the North, encourage them to go to Kelly's presentation on developing a future pathway, and for those of you down in the South, Paul Regional, I'll be presenting on effective communication. So it's a way for your staff to get up to date with ACES.
Okay. All right, and Patsy says that was Mary's session on volunteers. Well, it's all good for us when we're trying to get our volunteers using the TIF. Okay, we are going to move on a little bit, and we are going to talk about the ACES implementation observation tool. So this is something new. We're hoping it's something helpful and that it fills a need that has been expressed. And I'm going to turn this section over to Heather Turngren, who was very instrumental in helping to develop this tool.
Thank you, Stephanie. We're going to have you access the chat button a little bit longer, and I'd like to find out from you managers, and those of you who maybe are teachers but are observed by your manager, to use the chat box to share a little bit about what you guys are using currently for your teacher observations. And if there is anything that is missing from your current observational tool. So it's kind of a two-pronged question. If you could take a moment to chat Due to the nature of this webinar being archived, I am going to be reading out loud some of your chats so that those who listen to it in the future will be able to know what tools you as managers are currently using. We have Cindy saying the district developed a tool that is mandatory to use. It doesn't fit real well with ABE, and I think I've heard that from other managers as well. And Deb is saying that she's required to use Charlotte Daniels rubrics as required through your TDE district process. Deb, I'm not sure what district you're in, but Stephanie and I are in Minneapolis, and we use the Standards of Effective Instruction, so we're very familiar with that framework. Jean Zender says ditto. Claudia, as our district uses the Charlotte Danielson framework, you can't alter it that much, so you might find what we have useful for you. Some people have an evaluation form that has been adapted from other programs. Jody is talking about using things that she's created herself. It would be great. What's missing? My tools are a little too broad and I have to focus on too many things. As an observer, and I realize that can be difficult. Okay, Eric Lind is talking about Danielson's framework. Kathleen also mentions that. It seems many school districts might be going towards that because of the teacher evaluation system that was set up through the legislature, I think a few years ago. And I thought there was someone saying that they didn't really have anything. So nothing yet. She just started. What we'd like to do is, now that we have some ideas that many managers are using mandated district evaluations and processes, is the tool that Stephanie and I have been working on. It incorporates some of what might be referred to as the Danielson framework, but it's just a very light version, an ultra-light version. We can show to you just a moment. I'd like to report that at the DOC, they're required to use a state agency review form, which sounds very mandated and official. It doesn't have a teacher observation form. Okay, so you might find this ACES observational tool useful, and with some of Teresa's feedback, it might be helpful. You can download the tool that I'm going to be showing to you from your materials. It's listed. It's in a Word document called the Observation Tool. It was last updated on October 7th. It's in a Microsoft Word document. In the materials format, you can download that. I am going to be going to the next screen so you can see what the tool looks like. It's what we have called the ACES Implementation Observation Tool. This observation tool was created in a response to express needs by managers. So it wasn't just an added thing for managers and lead teachers to do, but it was because we heard from the field that there was a need for some sort of tool so managers could show and demonstrate through an observation that their staff are implementing ACES. This is a 3-page tool. I'm going to bring up the actual tool now. If you are not able to view this tool, please chat to me and I can let you guys know. But it is in a Word format, so you might be able to modify it if you need to for your district resources. At the top, you'll see that you can put the name of the instructor, the class that you observed, the date of the observation, the observer. This tool was a document that Stephanie and I found from the Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Minnesota. So I like to think about it as a truly Minnesota tool using Minnesota-created ACES. It had 7 areas for observation, and with careful feedback, thoughtful feedback, mindful feedback from many other ACES participants, we narrowed it down to just looking at ACES skills. Some of the other areas for observations we felt was more best or promising practices for teachers that perhaps is something different than just looking for how ACES is involved in the instruction. So if you look across, we have the 4 columns. The first column is the ACES skill that you're looking for. The second column mentions that it is not observed, and we give you some ideas of what that means. Indicators, if we go by Danielson's framework. Then this third column is the area for growth, so that could be indicators of where the staff could maybe gain some improvement. And the final column is areas of strength, so what they do that is phenomenal, that is including and looking for those ACES skills. The rows across is showing an ACES skill or a look for, what you as a manager or an observer would be looking for. If you look at the first row, it says number 1 is inclusion of ACES skills in the development of learning objectives. You could, as a manager, use the TIF at a glance, which is also in your materials on the drop-down menu of this webinar, for a complete list of those skills and sub-skills. We do not expect you as a manager to know every skill and sub-skill, but perhaps in working with this tool, you might become more familiar with some of those skills and sub-skills. Also, if working with your teacher or instructor, you can find out what skills and sub-skills they were actually intentionally embedding within their lesson or within their class. You can see we have a 1A and a 1B in the rows below. 1A would be ACES skills or sub-skills are included in the learning objective. 1B would be learning objectives are connected to a larger student outcome. Moving across from 1A, you can see in the not observed, you as a manager could say that there were no ACES skills or sub-skills including in the learning objectives for that unit, for that course, program, or student outcome. We have allowed space for you to write evidence, which is again part of that Danielson framework, that the observer is using evidence, and it's usually coming from student evidence.
And this is Stephanie. I'll just add quickly that under 1B on the left side of your screen where it says learning objectives are connected, as discussed in a pre-conference, again, this was coming from the point of view that often in an observation, the teacher meets first with her manager or lead teacher in order to discuss the lesson that is going to be observed. Then there is the observation itself, and then there is a debrief. And so when we refer to a pre-conference, we're talking about however the observer connects with the teacher who's going to be observed ahead of time in order to find out what the lesson is going to be about.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. If we move again across the rows in the area for growth under 1A, you can see we gave an idea of that the inclusion of at least one of the ACES skills or sub-skill in a learning objective could be an area for growth is that they just had one ACES skill or sub-skill. In area of strength, you could see that they have 2 or more ACES skills or sub-skills within their learning objective. So we're giving you that indicator, and you can cite evidence with your observation of the actual lesson or with that pre-conference meeting. Do you have any questions for that look for skill number 1, the inclusion of ACES skills in the development of learning objectives? If you have any questions for Stephanie or me, we could help answer that. And you can chat that out. Otherwise, I'll move towards the page 2, which then we're looking at ACES look for skills number 2, which is the selection and the use of instructional materials. So again, we broke that down into a A and a B that are listed in that first column on the left. 2A is that the ACES process was used in the selection of instructional materials. For those of us who have gone through ACES PLCs, we know that the ACES process is a step-by-step process. So we have the A, which is we assess the lesson or resource. Then we're going to C, complement the lesson or the resource to help include more ACES skills or sub-skills. E is that we evaluate the lesson or the resource, and we're looking at how well that lesson went when we were instructing it or teaching it. And S is the time that teachers need or instructors need to study the outcomes and look for the evidence of the student learning.
This is Stephanie again, and when I would do my ACES PLCs, I would always explain the ACES process. The assess is whatever curriculum you're using. Say that's a core textbook, say that's a resource you found online, maybe a reading that you're using, the newspaper, whatever. You look at that resource and you assess it to decide what skills it would teach on its face, sort of how it was meant to be taught, what would it naturally lend itself to, what skills would it naturally lend itself to teaching our students. The C, the complement, is then when we as teachers, looking at our classroom and the needs of our students, when we decide what else we can do with this lesson to incorporate more ACES skills or sub-skills. So the evaluate and study are a little bit more self-evident, but sometimes I found the assess and complement needed a bit of explaining, so I hope that helps.
Okay, and then again, if you move along the row by the different columns, you can see that indicator that the ACES process was not used. The ACES process was partially applied for an area of growth. The area of strength is that the ACES process was fully applied to this selection. In 2B, we have that the plan for this lesson or unit includes a variety of learning task formats to build students' ACES skills. And again, this is not just handing a worksheet that the student fills out, but the students are actually getting to some more of the DOK or the depth of knowledge skills and those soft skills. So students are using, for example, a Venn diagram for comparing and contrasting. Students are using student surveys so that they're getting up and using effective communication. We're using a KWL chart so that we can be thinking critically about our learning and try to access what we already know about a subject. A T-chart is creating, again, using a graphic organizer for our information. An exit slip is for a way for teachers to verify that, in fact, the students did get that learning target. You could do partner interviews, you can do dictation. The idea is that teachers are changing and using different learning task formats to build the students' ACES skills and scaffold them along their path towards post-secondary or college and employment and training. The indicators, again, are not observed, area for growth, and area for strength. If you have any questions about the second ACES look for, you can for sure chat them out and we'll try to answer them. We tried to make sure that we had enough space left over for you guys to write down the evidence during your observation. I'll be moving along to the third and final page for this document. It might seem long in 3 pages, but as you can see, there's a lot of space there for you to be writing your evidence. The third look for skill is the classroom as a reflection of the target environment. And this is ACES language, but what we mean by a target environment is that it refers to the environment that an instructor is trying to prepare students to transition into. If your students are transitioning into the workplace, the target environment would be using as much authentic language and authentic workplace materials as possible. If you're transitioning students into a training program, again, you're trying to get that more authentic and more training program environment. As well as if you're transitioning students into a community college or post-secondary, it's getting a more authentic and real-life aspect of that environment. We took that indicator or look for, number 3, and we broke it down into a 3A and a 3B. So 3A is looking at the language used in the classroom and that it's reflective of the target environment. For example, we were saying if academic language is what you want for ABE or your GED students, Are the students using that academic language? Is the teacher using that academic language? Is it the target language for that environment? Also, if you're using language for a workplace, let's say you're working on a healthcare curriculum, are the teachers and the students using that authentic language that is for that target environment? Again, we have the 3 different indicators: not observed, area for growth, area for strength, with ideas of what we would decide that indicator to be, and a space for you to be writing evidence from your observation. If you take a look at 3B, the last row, it is the routines or norms used in the classroom. Are they reflective of the target environment? For example, do you have a sign in and a sign out, which would be needed in a workplace setting? Are students required to report absences, which again is required for a workplace setting, but I would say it's required for a training program. It's required as well for life experiences in real life, for a doctor's appointment or in college. Are students asked to do cooperative or group work, teamwork, which is you need to do in college, you need to do in the workplace? Again, we have the 3 different indicators as we move along. It's not observed in your observation. There's an area for growth, or the teachers are very strong in that category. That is what we have created, and again, with a lot of input from people in the field, and I think we have pared it down from our original 7 categories to these 3 very strong ACES look for skills categories.
All right, we're going to be closing this so that we can get back to our presentation now. So Heather just did a beautiful job of going over the tool with you. So here it is, a snapshot. There are 3 focus areas for observation that align with ACES. So when developing this tool, we thought of ACES not just the skills and the sub-skills, but as ACES as a whole process and a whole way of thinking about teaching. I remember Betsy Parrish, when we would do some of our early PD work on this, I remember her saying it's not what you teach, it's how you teach. It's a method of teaching. And so that's kind of what we kept in mind with when developing this tool. So it's inclusion of ACES skills, use of the ACES process and classroom as reflection of target environment. We have 3 categories for rating teacher areas of growth and strength, examples of look-fors in each focus area, and space to record the evidence. So you've just seen what it looks like, and what we're hoping to get now is a little bit of feedback from you. So how can this tool work for you? Would you use it as a standalone tool? It sounds as though many of you have something you're mandated to use. So possibly this could be used in conjunction with your current tool, something that is a complement to what you're already using. Maybe we could take just a moment or 2 to chat out any ideas about how this might or might not work in your program. And we are also wondering if there are any managers out there who would be willing to pilot this observation tool and give us feedback on how it worked for your program. This is still something that we're kind of saying is a draft because it hasn't actually been used yet. So we are wondering if anyone might be willing to be a pioneer and use this with some staff and let us know how it goes. All right, Sarah says she might be interested. Thank you, Sarah. Yep, George Kimball says the Department of Correction is thinking about peer observation. Wonderful. And Stacy says using it in conjunction with the district tool. Yes. Okay, great. So again, we would welcome any and all feedback. And Teresa's interested in using it. Yes, thank you, Teresa. Wonderful. We do appreciate that. Okay, we have just a little more than 15 minutes left today, and we are going to spend the rest of our time talking about ACES in Action, an implementation model from Eric Lind. This was from a presentation that Eric did, I believe, at Summer Institute this summer. And it's talking about how in his program as a manager, he's able to incorporate ACES into his staff PD. So Eric, are you ready to go?
Just 1 second, let me unmute him, otherwise we won't hear. Just a sec, Eric.
No problem.
Okay, we should be able to hear you. Eric, do you want to say something? We'll make sure your sound's okay.
Sounds okay. All right, can you hear me? Good afternoon.
We can, yeah, great.
Great. Okay, well, I'll just talk about our plan that we started last year. It's pretty straightforward. It's a follow-up. Most of our teachers, 8 of our 12, did the PLC 1. A couple did it in the spring a year and a half ago, and the rest did it last fall. So we got the basic trainings on the different TIF categories, and we wanted to start implementing it in our classes and into our units. So we want to make a plan of how to do that. So we grouped together, made PLCs. We've got 2 sites, and we teach the same levels at each site. So teachers got together by site, and also evening too. So either in groups of 2 or 3 to focus on implementing the standards. We started last February, so we had 4 months. We do our units. We do manage our own by the month. So we have monthly units. So we looked at each of those months and how we could integrate TIF skills into the current unit. So we scheduled the PLCs to meet an hour and a half per month, and so they'd have dedicated time to meet in their small group and look at how they could implement the new standards into their units. So the long-term goal is that they get used to this process, it be ingrained, and just become a natural part of how they plan their units and lesson plans. So we worked together with the teachers to set up some specific expectations, outcomes of what they would do each month. So for each unit, which I said was 4 to 6 weeks long, they would first look at the TIF at a glance, pick 1 or 2 categories, and then check off what they think skills fit best or sub-skills fit best into that unit. They were mainly looking at the self-management, developing a future pathway, and navigating systems to tie in with some of the other transition goals that we have in the state. And then for each unit, besides getting the general skills they'd use in that unit, they were going to do 1 detailed TIF lesson plan to get used to that, using the lesson planning grid, which I think, are you going to be talking about that some more in this webinar? I thought I saw that somewhere in here. But using a TIF lesson plan and then write up a detailed using that grid, and then much of them also just wrote up specific lesson plans tying that TIF into it. And then they were going to collect 3 to 5 student samples work. Yeah, there we go. There's the example of the TIF lesson grid. And then they would each collect 3 to 5 samples of student work that show how the students did the TIF lesson. It might be a project, or it could be a survey they did. One of the lower levels did a self-management. They did surveys before and after the unit of how many people had like notebooks or calendars, things like that. And then we have a thing in our district that's called Rubicon Atlas Curriculum Mapping. It's an online tool where we map out our units and for the whole year. And part of it is what standards we teach in that. And so the teachers added the TIF standards or skills into that curriculum mapping, so that can save from year to year. And then also attach lesson plans to that online curriculum. There's an example of one of the teachers. And I think they put a full sample in the materials that show that part, and in the lesson plan there's some student samples too. And then at the end, so we did that for 4 months, 1.5 hours each, and then at the end of the time we got together and we just discussed how things went, and teachers thought it was definitely a positive experience. They were excited to continue to move from just being in the training and talking about the different categories to really getting it into their units. They said it helped them focus on just having the TIF to know, most, as we've talked about, most of these transition skills teachers have been teaching all along, but it's nice to have a guide of what are considered the most essential transition skills and which ones to focus on. And it also pushed, especially some of the lower level teachers said it pushed them to teach some of these skills at a lower level than maybe they had done before. This year, it's not quite as intense. We're meeting on a quarterly basis, so they're filling in. They're doing the same process for the first couple of units of this year, the fall units, and then we'll be updating and expanding and adding more into the spring units with their quarterly meetings. So I think that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. It was just a way that we work together with the teachers to have a set time where they can meet with somebody at their same level, and then to have some specific goals of what they're going to get down, both in the curriculum mapping and their units, and also some specific lesson plans using that TIFF lesson grid. Any questions?
This is Heather, and I just want. Oh, I think I might have to.
Oh, I can't hear you.
There's a lot of feedback.
Should I mute myself?
I think so. Thank you. Now you can hear me. I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing this. I know other managers wanted to hear how you were able to work it into your PLCs, but I think you also brought up something so important, is that teachers have been doing this for many years. This is just a way for teachers to write it down and to show and demonstrate that, yes, they have been using these skills in their classrooms.
And this is Stephanie, and as I chatted out and as Eric mentioned, I didn't include sort of a fuller picture of what one of the teachers in Eric's program submitted in the webinar materials, so you can see how, based on that grid, that lesson grid that the teacher put together, how they then develop some activities and for their classroom to use with their students. All right, so thank you. If anyone has any questions for Eric, please feel free to chat them out or raise your hand. And at this point, we are wrapping up. And so we're just going to save a minute or two to see if anyone has any questions or comments. There's been a lot of great participation today. I will say when you exit the webinar, I do believe you will be prompted to answer some evaluation questions. The evaluation is not too long. It's maybe 6 or 7 questions. We would really, really appreciate getting some feedback. If you don't have time to answer the questions just now, you should also be sent an email asking you to take the evaluation. But this was a little bit new for me, at least, doing a webinar like this that was just for administrators, so we would like to know if you found it helpful and if it addressed the questions that you had.
And this
Again,
is Patsy. I'm just going to chime in here, and I just want to be sure and thank Stephanie and Heather for all their work putting this together, and for the development of the observation tool, and for really doing all of the planning for this webinar. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And I'm so pleased that we had such a great turnout. So thank you to everyone who came and participated.
Thank you, Patsy. And a final push to have people send their staff to the North Regional in Bemidji and the South Regional in Mankato, and also to remind any ACES leaders in your programs to join us for that quarterly webinar on December 1st. So thank you so much. Heather and I were really happy to be with you today, and if there are any questions, we'll hang out for a couple of minutes and try to help. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your afternoon.